Greetings and thank you for joining me with Tea with Jess. The mug today is Ohio Anna. I'm so bad at the camera stuff. And I was excited to use this mug today because the Ohio Anna Festival is coming up. And I will be there. It's virtual. It's free. I will be there. Tons of other great writers will be there. And it's just a great way to hear writers chat with each other about their work. I'm going to be on a historical fiction panel, and also to, find out, add to your growing to be read list and pile and support Ohio Anna just by showing up. Like I said, it's free. So that's today's mug. Life is hard. Have tea, as Nana would say. And I'm excited to be not just tea with just Jess. Those are fun, right? But it's always great to bring in a friend. And so I'm excited to bring in a friend named Christina Consolino. I'm going to bring her in just a second. We go back. We met. Maybe she'll correct me if I'm wrong when she's live and with us, through the Antioch Writers Workshop. She served on the board. She was a volunteer, an attendee. I served as director for a handful of years, and we just got to know each other through that. And Christina is super supportive of other writers. She teaches for, I'm spacing on the name.
Wordsworth. It's Wordsworth.
Yeah, writing connection. She'll tell us when she's on. With great classes that she teaches, and Katrina Kittle, another writer friend, teaches. So if you're interested in writing, that's a great place. Wordsworth Writing Connections, a great place to learn some craft and meet other people. At this point, virtually. But what's great about that is you can join from anywhere. And she's an editor at Literary Mama. She's been a teacher, published essays, short stories. And today she's with us because of her debut novel, Rewrite the Stars, which I have had the joy of reading. And I hope each of you will give it a chance. Buy the book, get it from your library. And I'm going to bring in Christina Consolino. And here she is. Welcome, Christina Consolino.
Thank you.
Of Rewrite the Stars.
I love that. I love that, Jess. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm learning these little tips and tricks as I go along, learning about how to use technology. We were chatting a little bit before. It's been a year, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get lighting right. Obviously, not quite there yet. And the pandemic has taught me many things, but one thing it has taught me is to really appreciate good lighting experts.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, neither am I.
Well, you're looking good there. You got the light behind you, and that's great. So welcome. What does it feel like? We'll start with that. What does it feel like to have a debut novel out in the world?
First of all, thank you for having me. And it's a little odd, to be honest with you. As I told you before, it's there, it's out there now, but at the same time, I think, wow, did I really get there? But I will say this, I checked I think it was the library the other day, and there's a copy on hold for someone. And I said, that's my book. Somebody has my book on hold. So it was a great feeling. I mean, this has been something I've wanted to do for years, and I think I'd convinced myself that it just wasn't going to happen. And so I just need to remember to embrace all the goodness and kind of, just float on it for a little while.
Yeah, definitely float on it. And what I always think, people who come to like videos like this, or people who put your book on hold, or, there's nobody requiring other people. Like there's no rule, like you have to go get that book. So people are voluntarily wanting to engage with our work. And that always is so touching to me.
It is.
It's very affirming. Hold up your book. I bought mine on as an ebook.
Oops, there's a little bit of a glare, but
yes.
There we go.
Stars. Doesn't it feel good to hold that?
It does.
Yes.
My daughter likes to go like this.
Aw. That is amazing and awesome. So give us a summary, just like an overview. What is the premise for Rewrite the Stars?
The premise is mainly that we have two characters, Sadie and Theo. Those are the main characters, their point of view characters. And I always like to tell people the setup first, just that mainly due to Theo's PTSD, they are on the pathway to divorce, though they do live together. He's at the back of the house. And so one day Sadie goes to the grocery store and she meets a man. She speaks to him for just a couple minutes and she realizes, well, wait a minute, am I ready to move on? I might be ready to move on. And that kind of just propels her on this whole emotional journey for, how is she going to be happy? How will her family be happy? What's going to make Theo happy? And as many women, especially I think, and moms, because she has 3 kids, know, trying to juggle all of that happiness is kind of makes it a little bit complicated.
Yes, very much so. And you mentioned that Theo has PTSD, which you bring to life very beautifully. And that's something I've referenced in some of my own books because they're set right after, fairly closely after the Great War. So it wouldn't have been called PTSD after the First World War, but it's, by any name, that is something that many soldiers, and as you point out in your author notes very correctly, that it's an experience people who haven't been in the military can have. And I'm exploring it a little more in depth in the book I'm working on. So I'm just curious, like, what drew you to having PTSD as sort of it's part of Theo's character. And I do love that you have from both points of view.
Oh, good. Thanks.
I think that works really well. And you, well, I'm complimenting you, but it's so true. The voices are very distinct. I feel like, it's you infused through your 2 characters, but they're very different voices. So they both come to life, which is quite a trick to pull off because you're writing in first person for each of them.
Right.
You pulled it off.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So what drew you to having PTSD as both Theo's part of his character and a big part of what drives their relationship in the plot?
That's kind of a complicated question. I mean, not necessarily the question itself, but like the process. And it wasn't something that I truly thought about until recently. I know that sounds weird. I think I was just so mired in revising. But the book originally featured ALS, so Lou Gehrig's disease, which is, a neuromuscular disorder. And I went to a writing conference in, I'm going to say 2018. I can't really remember. 2017, 18, somewhere in there.
Lately, so
I know.
okay.
Yeah. And something felt when I was listening to the speakers who were fabulous, they were talking about antagonists and tension, especially in your story, micro tension, macro tension, all of that. I sat back and I said to myself, something's not right here. And so at about this point, I should mention my sister works with veterans and has worked with suicide prevention and PTSD for years. And so I think at the back of my head, all of a sudden I said, well, Theo shouldn't be living with ALS. He should be living with PTSD. And it was almost like a puzzle piece just went, there you go. And that's when I brought his voice into it, because the original story did not have his voice, but I felt there was no way to do justice to PTSD and someone living with it without actually having his voice in the story.
Right, because then it becomes a third party observing experience. So I really like that you brought that to life.
Thank you.
What gave you the original idea? What's the origin story of your story?
I always tell people, I'm always like, it was Father's Day in 2012. If I knew, I don't know. I want to say that was June 12th that year. I'm not really sure. I know at some point I checked, and I seriously, Jess, I went to the grocery store to pick up some stuff and I had a conversation with the person behind me in line. Have no idea what he looks like, have no idea who he is. I did not stalk him in the parking lot the way Sadie sort of felt like she did.
We must note here that you are happily married.
Yes. But something, I stopped. I remember sitting in my car going, this needs to go somewhere. And so I drove home and my kids were relatively young then. And I said, honey, I need to sit down for a couple minutes. And he's like, sure. Okay, so we
And
grabbed the
about
groceries. Yes, I know. Grocery store man. Yep. And so I started right then and there, and I just kept adding to it. And I think the ALS, I know where the ALS came from because I have a doctorate in physiology and in specifically neuromuscular disorders. So I write mental and physical health issues because that's what I hate to say I enjoy that, but that's what I'm drawn to on the science side. So I thought, well, that will be easy. Not that it ever is, but nothing's easy. Yeah. But that's where it came from. So I really have said before that I wish I knew who that person in line behind me at the store was, because I would say, thank you very much.
Yeah, we don't often, well, now we definitely don't, but we didn't in the before times. Maybe we will more in the after times. We don't stop and talk and turn, we don't turn and talk to strangers. So I can see where that kind of tickled your brain and you started brainstorming the scene. I love that you kept that in. That's great.
Well, my writing group, that's still in there. It's morphed a little bit. And at some point they said, well, that's really nice, but we need a little bit more of X, Y, or Z. And so I had to revise, of course, but I stuck with that one. I'm like, I need to keep that in. That's, in romance terms, it's the meet cute, I think, but not that this is romance, but it does have romantic elements. So
yeah. And that's actually something I really enjoyed. And I'm not trying to be, mean or whatever about traditional romance novels at all. I think, all the genres are great and they're different books for different readers. But I liked that there was this romance element. But you're right, it's not a romance. It's a relationship novel. And I like that, she's exploring like where she is going to go next in life. Theo is too. And how will this all work together? So I really enjoyed that. So where did you find the title? The title's gorgeous. Rewrite the Stars.
Thanks. So that also wasn't the first title. Jess, I've done a lot of revision on this novel.
I hear you.
The first title was After We've Fallen. And that came from actually a conversation with a priest, and that scene's no longer in the book. And I did a lot of thinking again after that writers conference, which I guess I should say, I mean, honestly, it was the 10-minute novelist conference in Covington, Kentucky, and they have another one coming up this year, virtual. I did a lot of thinking and I said, you know what, this title is too passive. When you're falling, you don't really have control. It's not very, I don't know. I just felt like it was too passive. And I tend to use titles as guiding like forces for me. When I look up at the title, I kind of engross myself in the story. And around that time, I think we had already bought, The Greatest Showman. And it probably was the song Rewrite the Stars with my head. And one day I just was writing some dialogue and her friend said something about rewriting the stars. And I went, oh, well, there's my new title.
There's my new title. It's a beautiful title. It fits the book.
Thank you.
Beautifully. So you've mentioned writing conferences and writing groups. So you're hitting on one of my touchstones, which is community.
Yes.
And being part of the writing community, a good literary citizen, lifting each other up and helping each other out. But I also think being part of a community, whether it's a writing buddy that you swap material with or a writing group. And I know the members of your writing group and they're lovely people.
They are.
Group. And you mentioned the 10-minute novelist, a great conference, and we worked on a workshop together. So can you talk a bit about how that's been part of your journey as a writer, the writing community?
I think, yes, I can. Not I think, of course I can. But I think it's one of those things that I think some people, what's the word I'm looking for? I take to the community more than others. I mean, I am a big introvert. I really would prefer to stay home and not talk to anybody, although this is lovely, Jess, so don't take it in any way.
But you're at home.
I am at home. So, but I could just live alone sometimes. But
I hear you. I'm an introvert too.
Yeah. So I feel like in some ways, some people take to it better. And I think it helps to have community members who, even though they might be introverts like you're very welcoming. And in the Dayton area, people tend to be very welcoming. So that writing, I think the writing group as a whole, the Dayton area, the community there, I just realized, you know what, these people know a lot. And I can learn from them, and I love learning. It doesn't matter if I mean, some of it I don't take to, like computer stuff, I'm not very good at, but I love learning, whether it's, something about nature or some craft items. So that helped, that I really wanted to learn, and I trusted these people. And I'm glad I did, because, not only do they help you learn the craft that you need to have for writing, but they also teach you a little bit about, networking and how to, post blogs or whatever, anything within the writing realm. I feel like I've learned from someone else in my writing community.
And I think that word trust is important, to find that trusted group, people who, know they're not just making it up. They've had the experience, and they know what the journey is like, and they're willing to share with people who are on the journey and need to know what they've learned, but they're also open to like, oh, I'm still on the journey. I want to know what these people are able to show me. So it becomes this kind of beautiful give and take. And you referenced your science background, and I know we've talked about that, and I love that about you. By the way, I did look at the cooking video, and now will whisk appropriately. I'd been the beater. I should have been the side to sider all this time.
Yes.
I'm referencing a video that it was the cooking.
I think it was Cooks Illustrated or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Like, is anybody else fascinated by this? Like I am. I'm like, well, she's fascinated. I'm going to take a look. It's like, this is fascinating. I've been whisking things wrong this whole time.
Yeah.
And by the way, I used that side to side whisking on glaze for some rolls this weekend, and it works so great.
Oh, wow. Well, there we go. We've got our own little data sample right there.
So, if you're here for learning about writing, that's great. Bonus, find out about how to actually make egg whites. And
that's right.
So your science side, if you will, and maybe it's silly to divide people like, oh, you have a writing side and a science side. But how does that inform you as a writer? Are you somebody who, you've mentioned revision. Do you plot things out? Is this just a totally different part of your brain than your brain as a scientist?
That's a great question. I don't plot anything out, although I feel like I have some vision in my head, though, of where I want the story to go. Whether or not, like this book, this is not the original end. You're not surprised to hear that, right? That I revised it. No. Yeah. I usually have an idea of where I want something to go. I think that, and I agree with you. There's let's say layers, right? We have layers or different facets, but there's not really one side or the other side. The science side can get me in trouble when it comes time to doing research, because I am trained as a scientist, like I should have done research, but I decided to teach instead. So I can, I start going here and there. And I mean, rabbit holes for I don't want to say a regular person, but just a lay person can be bad. And then sometimes they can get worse for me, just because I think, well, that's really cool. Now let me go see what that DNA, thing is about. So I try not to do that. But I do feel, though, in a way, and I think I've said this before some other time, that because I pick things apart, especially with the anatomy, then I tend to pick my own writing apart in a different way than I think other people might. And it's hard to explain what I mean, really, but I feel like I just dissect my work differently than maybe somebody else might.
Okay.
So
interesting. Yeah. So we can get your book wherever fine books are sold, IndieBound, the usual.
Yep. Bookshop, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. They're there. It's there.
And we can keep up with you. I created these little banners to show. So you're on Twitter.
I'm impressed. Look at that, Jess.
I'm always trying to learn.
I love it. Yes. Yeah.
Find Christina on Twitter. Find her on Facebook. And go to her website, where you will find ways to order her book, but also we'll find out about some more of your writing. Can you talk a little bit more about the other kinds of writing you're doing, and what you might be working on next?
Sure. I do. So here I'm going to say sides again, because I have this little more professional side that deals with Literary Mama, where I edit and I do write profile. I love to write profiles, which are just conversations with authors. So I like to do that. And aside from that, I usually submit maybe personal essays or fiction stories, short stories. On the other hand, I also, on my website, ChristinaConsolino.com, that's where I really have taken off with my author interviews. I say taken off because I feel like I'm doing a lot of them this year, especially. But I enjoy it. I learn so much about different people. I get to interact even virtually. And so those, if any of you are authors out there and you want to be profiled, let me know. It's just a quick, send you a couple questions. After I've done some research, and hopefully I did not fall down the rabbit hole though, in doing so. So that's, I tend lately to just stick with kind of profiles because I'm also working on one of my works in progress, which deals with Alzheimer's. So that's the next health issue. And that is really, it's close to my heart because my mother has Alzheimer's, and the first draft of this was written the summer that she was diagnosed. So it's not autobiographical, but it's based in kind of my experience. I was there while she went through all the tests and all of that sort of thing. So I hate to say I'm excited to work on it, but it's finally, like, I think it will finally, there'd be a catharsis in it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So,
which is great. Yeah. You should be excited to work on it. That's, it's a way we can work through those experiences and explore them and touch other people's lives. And Alzheimer's or dementia, I mean, my parents had variations of that. And I think so many people, it's kind of hard pressed to know anyone who doesn't know someone who's, had that.
I agree.
Disease. So that's something people will really relate to, just like they will with this book.
I hope so.
Hold it up for us again, because we want to emblazon that image
on people's. There it is.
Debut.
Oops, I got the hand.
Anything you'd like to add before we end the broadcast? If people want to leave questions on the Facebook feed, on either my group, I'm just looking at my phone to see.
Yeah, I'll go back and answer if they have any questions. I'm happy to do that.
Questions, please. So please go ahead if you're watching this later to leave a question or two for Christina. So any final thoughts about your book and events that you're having and whatnot?
I honestly, the thing I always like to say to people is, if I can do it, you can too. I mean, it takes a lot of work and you can't be afraid of it, but if I can do it, you can too. So, I'm having a couple other events you can check on Facebook, or I have a list on my website, but you want to write a book, just buckle down and get started. There's no time like the present.
There you go. Oh, that's a very inspiring note to end on. Well, thank you for joining me on Tea with Jess.
Thank you.
And I'll be back next week with some thoughts about something, because I've always got thoughts about something. And meanwhile, life is hard. Have tea and be kind to one another. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
All right.